So welcome, I'm Jeff Haines, a marketing director here at Anodot, and I'm joined by Greg O'Hare, who runs our technical proof of value team. This is a no pressure session. We hope it can serve as a fun venue for you to get a glimpse of how Anodot drives business value for organizations like yours. And we hope you can get all of your questions about cloud cost management answered here. Simply use the chat box to input your questions and we'll answer them after the short demo. I just wanted to provide a little information about Greg and I. We both came to Anodot from long stints at companies that offer solutions that overlap with the cloud cost management space. But we were both excited to join Anodot because of the singular focus on helping businesses maximize the value they get from their cloud through better cost management. We both enjoy working here because of the crazy pace of innovation, the great team, and the focus on our customers. And we're both geeks who enjoy a number of hobbies in our spare time. Greg is an accomplished axe thrower, and I'm an avid gardener, just a few of our hobbies. We both enjoy watching Nordic noir movies on Netflix. Those are mysteries. And so with that, I hope you'll just sit back and enjoy the session. We're going to discuss how to eliminate waste in your public cloud and Kubernetes environments. So first, we're going to run through a few slides that outline the challenge of waste in the cloud and how Anodot's approach for controlling that waste is different. Then Greg's going to give a brief demo of Anodot Cost in action. And finally, we'll wrap up with a Q&A. So cloud waste is rampant. In April, Gartner projected that the worldwide cloud spend will grow over 20% in 2022 to a total of just under $500 billion. At the same time, businesses estimate that over 32% of their cloud spend is unnecessarily wasted. That's a worldwide annual tax of nearly $160 billion on businesses. So companies like yours are billed by cloud providers each month without clear cause for why the amount rises or falls, or how to accurately forecast future spend. And there's no way using cloud native tooling to determine how efficiently cloud services are being utilized or if increased spend is driving better business outcomes. Visibility into cloud economics across multi-cloud infrastructure is even more complicated and opaque. Cloud waste management is a problem that will only grow if left untreated. But businesses aren't struggling with cloud waste due to a lack of effort towards managing their costs. According to the FinOps Foundation, on average, organizations are using 3.7 distinct tools today to manage their cloud spend. And 75% of companies have a centralized cloud cost governance team in place. These are often called cloud centers of excellence or FinOps teams. Yet, with the upwards of a third of spend still going towards waste, it's clear these tools and efforts are not paying off. So after a decade run of nearly uninterrupted business expansion that aligned closely with the rise of cloud, companies are now faced with a difficult market in the last few months. During this period of economic contraction, businesses are looking to cut costs within their large line items to shore up revenue growth numbers. And one of the largest line items we all know for many businesses is their monthly cloud bill. If there ever was a time to finally take control of cloud waste, this is it. So where does cloud waste originate? Each cloud bill line item is generated from a simple equation of three elements, facets of each that can be wasteful when not managed properly. The first element is the selection of your cloud service provider, the specific service, the instance family, size, processor, OS, and generation. Service types responsible for major costs include compute and storage. Selecting a cloud service provider and choosing an instance is a foundational step of the development process and can be one that's challenging to change and alter after the fact, after that selection's been made. So to minimize waste from service selection, you need to visualize the business mappings between who and what are using which services, and you need a way to monitor for options for better workload to instance alignment, such as when a new instance family or generation is introduced that might offer a better fit. The second element is how you utilize the service you selected and how well you utilize it. This includes the volume of the service you're using in instance hours, gigabytes, et cetera, how much data is being transferred between regions and out of your cloud, how well your utilization is right-sized. You obviously want the utilization of compute resources in an instance to be as high as possible, since you pay for the full instance whether or not you use all of it or not. You also need to be vigilant to catch and terminate unused zombie infrastructure. So to minimize utilization waste, you need to visualize the business connections between who and what are using how much volume, and you need to tie this utilization to its impact on the business bottom line. You also need to identify opportunities to optimize and size down over-provisioned infrastructure and terminate zombies. Finally, you need to be able to monitor and forecast utilization at multiple intervals and need the ability to detect anomalous utilization in near real time so you can avoid that bill shock at the end of the month. The final element of the equation is the unit price you pay for service usage. The most basic unit price is AWS's on-demand pricing. Then there's different types of discounts, RI, savings plans, committed use discounts. And then finally, one of the largest discounts can be found by negotiating an enterprise discount with your cloud service provider. So to carve away at waste from paying a high unit price, you'll need, again, to visualize your costs, optimize discounts, and monitor your costs to ensure that you know what and why you're spending, leverage reservations optimally and effectively, and accurately forecast your future cloud spend so you can help negotiate those discounts. So to recap, cloud waste is a growing problem that businesses are struggling to solve. We've also dug into the 3 components of cloud costs and looked at what is needed to minimize waste within each. And now we're going to talk about how Anodot's approach to cloud cost management is different, how Anodot actually drives results like these that we've delivered for Amdocs. So Anodot is totally focused on FinOps for multi-cloud and Kubernetes. With Anodot, you can visualize your entire multi-cloud and Kubernetes infrastructures from macro infrastructure-wide views all the way down to the specifics of each container. You can empower your team to allocate and track every dollar of spend. You'll also get finance and DevOps teams on the same page with personalized reports. Next, we help you optimize and reduce cloud waste with savings recommendations your DevOps teams will actually implement. You'll be able to purchase the right instances in the most cost-effective way, and you'll utilize them fully. Finally, we help you monitor your cloud spend so you can respond to anomalies or anomalous activity immediately and are never surprised by your cloud bill. And our team of data scientists has delivered machine learning powered forecasting that helps you accurately predict costs and negotiate those enterprise discounts. With Anodot, you'll realize a culture of FinOps that finally tackles and solves the cloud waste problem. Here are a few of our cloud cost management customers. Anodot is the complete cloud cost management package. It's designed to help you eliminate waste and maximize the return on your cloud investment. And now Greg's going to take over and dive into the Anodot Cloud Cost platform.
All right, so what we should be looking at right now is the Anodot Cloud Cost platform. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the things that Jeff just outlined, right? We know that there's a lot of waste that takes place in the cloud. And sometimes we know why that is, and sometimes we don't. So a lot of customers use Anodot as a method of finding out just what's happening, where is their waste? And the way that you start that foundational step is understanding where you're spending, right? Understanding what you're utilizing, how much of a thing you're utilizing, and to all the stuff that Jeff had mentioned. So we start you with some dashboards that are customizable, but generally speaking, what we're doing is we're showing some key elements into where you currently are with your spend, where we see you going based on our forecasting model. So you have an understanding of where you're going to end up at the end of the month. We can see where we are with the previous month. And then probably most importantly is we give you an indication as to how much you have across the entirety of what we're measuring for our recommendations, specifically what you could achieve in terms of savings. Now, I'll be completely forthright. This number looks very nice, but you have to keep in mind when you're looking at a tool like this, and this is true of anything, right? Whether or not you're looking at cloud native tools or whether or not, the idea that you're going to save 100% of this number is not always realistic, because there might be contractual reasons, there might be legacy code reasons, there might be applications that need a certain chipset, so you couldn't change the infrastructure that powers it, right? There's going to be some level of we can't take this action. And I just want to put that out there, because some places claim that, oh, save up to 78% of your bill, etc. We show you not just what you could expect to save, we're also going to show you the details of all of that. So we're not just saying, go see the light at the end of the tunnel, you can save this giant bucket of money. We have a recommendations engine and we show the dashboard. So you're able to see collectively what you're able to see, in terms of savings opportunity. We also break it down by type. So to some of the stuff that Jeff had mentioned, your EBS volumes, one of the things he outlined was not just the size of it, but the type of drive that you're actually, type of volume that you're actually using. And so we'll even show stuff like, hey, you have a certain type of EBS volume running. You're in an IO1 drive. You could move to a GP2 or coming soon GP3, and this is going to save you this dollar amount. We then give you the breakdown so you can see a lot more clearly just what's going on in terms of the actual IO. I was going to say IO usage, but it's the IOPS, sorry, because it's an IO1 drive, right? So what we're saying is you're paying to provision this amount of throughput. In actuality, you're using this amount of throughput. And with a GP2 drive, you would still be able to achieve that. In other words, we've looked at what you're currently utilizing. We know what you're paying for because you want this level of throughput. You're actually only using this level of throughput, and the other type of drive can still handle that. In other words, you're spending money that you don't need to spend, is the nuts and bolts of it. And we don't just tell you that you're saving this amount. We tell you the why you could save that amount. And then probably most importantly, one of the things that our customer base loves the most about our tooling is we also show you the command line interface necessary to execute that. And this is something that we're a fully API open platform. Most of our customer base pulls this recommendation set from our platform through the use of API and then pumps this into their tooling. It could be a Jira ticket, it could be a Zendesk ticket, it could be a Slack channel, some mechanism for saying, hey, we've identified this thing, go put it into your current system, your current process, right? We're not trying to disrupt your process and say, no, now everything has to come into our platform and everything has to be run from our platform. We do the data processing and then make it available to you. And so we're not trying to change your day-to-day activity. We're not trying to change your process. We're trying to provide you the information to say, take this information and plug it into your existing flow. And that's what our platform allows you to do. In fact, I'd say probably about 20% of our customer base, maybe 25% at this point, doesn't even log into our platform. They do everything via automation, everything via API. So when you're seeing this stuff, it then becomes, well, how many people do I need to have in? How many people need to have access to the platform? You can have as many people as you want in our platform, but it's not necessary. Because of our API first attitude, you can pump this information out of our platform into your current systems to just have that full integration with our processing in our analytics around it. So that's just one particular type. We have other stuff in here like RDS reservations, right? A lot of tooling allows for different insights. We show stuff like reservations and savings plans. So the commitment play, we have that as well. We support that. If we open this up, we're able to see the cost comparison across the different price points. What's really nice is we show the break-even point. So you can see exactly at what point it makes more economic sense to go with the reservation as opposed to staying on demand. If this were not consistent, we would not show anything that doesn't achieve that break-even point or exceed that break-even point, because what we don't want to recommend is go and buy this reservation and then you're not using it, right? Because reservations are one of those things, along with savings plans, they sound like the opportune thing to go and get and save money. And they're often looked at as a cost savings opportunity, and they are. The downside, though, is that when you're committing to them, you're on the hook for the payment back to Jeff's point of utilization, whether or not you use it is irrelevant. The fact that you're committed contractually to pay for it is the game. So what we do is we look at all of your infrastructure and we say, based on the usage patterns that we're looking at, will you benefit by purchasing this or will you not? Right. And so we look at all of that in aggregation. We can look at it at the linked account. We're looking at it now individually at this particular RDS instance. We can see it's MySQL. We can see the name of it. We can see the account that it lives in. And then we can see down here that the current annual cost is currently, let's just call it 16,000, we'll round up. And the new cost will be 9,000. So you're able to see that that ties out to the savings amount here. We can see it's not multiple AZ, right? So you're not going across multiple AZ zones. We can see that there's one of them. So it's specific to this. If there are a bunch of them, you'd see a resource list. So we show all that as well. And then we're saying go and get a standard 1 year no upfront. Okay. So we show you all the different elements and then we call out that at the 7-month mark, that's your expected ROI period. So that piece right there is one of the most fundamental pieces that people want to come in and see. And we just present it to you. There's no guesswork. We clearly articulate that at month 7, you're now, basically it's gravy money, right? You're saving more than what you're paying for in the long term. Now, if for whatever reason you need to say, hey, you know what, we can't get an RI for that for some, again, completely unknown reason, you can exclude our recommendations. So you can train our system to be smarter about what we're recommending. And we often get the question around, hey, I've got this instance, I can't upgrade it. I've got this EBS volume, I can't terminate it. I've got this EBS volume type, I can't change it because of X, Y, and Z reason. And it's irrelevant. Whatever the reason is, that's your reason. And if that's valid for you, that's valid for us too. So what this does is this allows you to exclude that from our recommendations list. So we're only showing net new recommendations that are viable, right? So we have that tracked. Now, we have a couple different options here. If we click on a particular thing, now I've selected everything, but you can also individually select a group or one. We can add labels. So one of the big things that people come to us and they say, well, we're trying to justify the price of a cost saving solution, right? Because if the end game is to save money, you're basically telling me I need to pay to save money, right? That's going to be across the board for everywhere. What adding labels can do, and this is the number one use case that we see for it, is if you just give it a quick label within our platform, basically that it was because of our platform that you saw this and you're executing it, it better allows you to track all of the cost savings that you got from us, as opposed to Jeff was just cruising through his volumes like he does on a Friday night and noticed an unattached one and went to delete it, right? To separate that situation, because we know how Jeff spends his Friday nights looking through his infrastructure, right? And then being able to say, well, I was in during work hours on Tuesday, looked at the platform and saw this recommendation. It's just a way to quickly note, I got this organically from what I was doing normally versus I used the tool to get this. And it builds the case to say, hey, you know what? When I look at the stuff that I did, I saved, and I'm just making up numbers, $15,000. When I look at the stuff I got from the platform, I saved $115,000, right? It helps you quantify where the decisions are being made from, right? What's the source of truth for getting this recommendation? Now, we have a bunch of different recommendation types. These span across several different things. So there's the reservation and savings plan stuff. That's pretty standard across the board. But we look at stuff like if you've got Elasticsearch that's idle, right? And what we do is when we look at this, we're saying, hey, you've got an instance count. It has been underutilized for 7 days. So we have time frame around it. We give you an understanding of how severe the waste is, because to have something that's wasted for a day, maybe it was just an off day. Maybe it was a weekend, right? If you're looking at this stuff and you're seeing 7 days, 14 days, 31 days, then you can say, all right, this is basically dead weight. We're just completely wasting money here. This is not a matter of we're going to attach it and it's going to go there. We're going to tweak something and it's now going to be utilized. This is basically the level of severity in terms of how bad the waste is. And that brings up a couple different things. So one, as we're talking about all of these recommendations, one of the big things that we see as a problem for our teams that we work with our customer base is the ability to very clearly articulate, we're doing work to reduce cost. The overall bill is going up, but we're doing stuff. You got to believe us, we're doing stuff, right? So we actually have a history report that shows all of the things that have been done within the environment to save costs. So you can see that there's a generation upgrade here, and that saved $13,000 annually when Jeff did it. All right, this was Thursday night's project. And then he's got Elasticsearch, right? He killed an Elasticsearch, and you can see that there's a savings amount here. So between this, Jeff saved $25,000. But in this period of time between January and February, when he did his cleanup, his actions resulted in $43,000 in annual savings. And this is time element, right? You can change when you're looking at. So if you have a cyclical pattern, if you decided to go through and say, we're going to use Anodot cost cleanup in the month of July, you can target just July and say, hey, look, here's everything that endeavor able to equate to in savings. The other thing I want to point out is when you exclude, as we talked about, we track that too. We're saying, hey, this is still on the shelf. This is how much you've excluded. So maybe you want to rethink, can you take a snapshot of it and then delete the volume? Is it something that you can reduce the size on while it's not being utilized, right? There's all these other factors that you can then have as a conversation point for your business. And if I were to click on the eyeball, it would then show me similar to the recommendation screen where it gives you kind of the information around what was going on that. The other thing that we're working on, because I know that we mentioned 7 days and this comes up, well, what about 7 days versus 14 days? It's in beta, so, not fully developed yet, but we're working out based on the feedback that we've received from our prospects and our customer base, the ability to start saying, well, how long is it really idle? What's the threshold? Why is it 14 days, not 7 days? And Jeff says, for DynamoDB, if I'm not getting connections within 3 days, I want to know and I want to kill that. Okay, great. Well, then we'll change it to 3 days for Jeff. And then our system will go through and rerun and start looking at recommendations and flagging recommendations post 3 days, right? And that's going to differ, depend on anyone's company, right? So outdated snapshot is probably the number one example that I can think of, or EBS unattached, right? A lot of companies have a reattachment policy. You've got 7 days to put that volume back to an instance, or you've got 30 days for your snapshot before you need to either take a new golden image or pooch it, right? So what we're doing is we have our method of going through and pulling out recommendations, but we're also saying how we view it is not necessarily the business context that you need. And one of the things with cost savings and eliminating waste is really having that context of when is it waste for you? And that's what this is allowing. This is now the next stage of where we're getting to that nuanced level of you get to change what we're recommending based on by applying your business context for how long something is until it's idle, how long something can be unattached for before it's forfeit, when you want to start getting, recommendations around, a number of connections to a database, maybe less than one isn't enough, maybe anything less than 5 in a week is, and that's where we're starting to go. We're starting to build that out. So there's a couple different elements that we want to think about, right? We need to know what it is that we're spending and where to start identifying where we could even look for opportunity. And then it's how well utilized is each resource, right? Can we eliminate? Can we reduce? And then the next piece of that is usually tracking, right? How do I know that this was done? Or how do I make sure that we're getting credit for those actions? And all three of these are rolled up into what we just looked at. So I want to be mindful that we're saying, collectively, we've got you covered across these things.
Greg, I think this is a great overview of some of the recommendations and the waste cutting measures that people will be able to enact. I was hoping you could run a little bit through some of the cost and usage explorer and just show how we enable folks to slice and dice costs and visualize their infrastructure. But I think that's also an important part in looking for opportunities and looking for understanding who's spending what and how much.
Yeah, perfect segue. It's almost like we planned this. So one of the things that we can do in the cost and usage explorer area is where we can start looking at slicing and dicing the data. One of the common ones that we see is actually by linked account, right? It's going to be completely dependent on your cloud infrastructure, right? We have this in AWS for now. We are multi-cloud, so we can measure Azure, we can measure GCP. We've got recommendations across the board for all three clouds. So we have that. What's nice about this is that our charting is drill-in. So if I want to focus on the data team, I have a couple options. One is I can click on that and then I can see their service spend. The alternative is if I just go back and reset this view, I can filter, right? So I can look at a subset of accounts should I choose to. So if accounts 1, 2, and 3 is business group A, I can create that view. And then part of that is segmenting out, because if I'm only responsible for accounts 2 and 3, I mean, at the company level, I care about everybody's waste, but I'm only on the hook for my waste, right? So I want to make sure I start there and then help everybody else. So this is one of the ways that we can do it, right? We can start filtering down to linked accounts. We can start filtering down to a subset of account. We can also toggle between the cost and the usage. So if I wanted to look at the number of workloads, the number of EC2 instances, I can do some of that. But what's really nice is some of the added elements. So right now we're looking at stacked bar. We can actually change this to a line chart, which to me is a little bit easier to indicate, hey, something happened, right? There's a change. The other thing that we can do, because I know everyone loves math and everyone loves to calculate things, is if we change this to a tabular view, we get a nice breakdown of all the costs. But what we're able to do is actually add a table trend row so we can quickly see, hey, there's been a change. And then I can start to focus on that particular service. And I can start drilling in down to that level. So what that would look like, if I go back to stacked bar, and we can see it's this, CloudWatch, there's been some changes, but I'll just take EC2 because it's a little bit more familiar. I can click in and see, hey, here's my compute, and I can see the patterns, right? And it looks like everything was low and slow, and then poof, we had a bit of a spike. So I can click in to see, here's my compute, and here's my pattern. Now I'm looking at the different instance types and family sizes that Jeff mentioned. And we notice this change here, C3 large increased. So again, I can click in and I can drill in, and I can see it's the Linux OS. And when I click on that, now I'm actually able to look at each instance and see the actual specifics, the billable rate. I can see what linked account it belongs to. I can see tags that are applied to it. I can see the resource name and the resource ID, at which point I can even click in and look down here and see the stats, right? I'm also able to change to the operation type, and I can see that part of the spike looks like a sharp increase in the data transfer out. And so now I can tie that back and say, why is that? And we can start the whole conversation for kind of looking into why that may be.
Hey, Greg, I
Jeff.
just wanted to interject. We have a great question here about our visibility. The question is, how do you know which resource is used by which team? Do you expect any specific labels or tags? So I think that would be interesting just to talk about how we help, allocate spend and tie it to teams.
Yeah, so we can look, it depends on what the service is. Some services are just aggregate like CloudWatch and things like that. It's not a per resource tagging, it's a collective group. generally speaking, if we're talking about like EC2, if we're talking about EBS, if we're talking about a DynamoDB and things like that, that we can tag, we have the ability under our cost allocation menu to create categories, which is a subset of infrastructure, right? And it can look across all of these things. So if I can look at a particular linked account, we'll just say ML, we'll say that that's the marketing team, right? We can look at a particular set of tags. So maybe it is environment, production, right? We can look at this information and say, because it's this account and because it's this tag and because it's this family type or, some level of operation or instance type, right? I know that C3X larges are the only ones that power product X. I can then say, because all these things are true, this is product X. So you're able to look at not just tagging, but all the pieces of metadata and say, because these things are true, I know it's this subset. We're also coming out kind of from and on high, this idea of business mapping, at which point you're able to come in and create a very similar view based on conditions. If the availability zone is this, if the Kubernetes label is that, it belongs to this particular map. What's different about business mapping, though, is this ability to split costs. So oftentimes in an organization, you have your different groups, as you just asked about, right? You've got, I need line of business 1 versus line of business 2, or I need project X versus project Q. And we now know that we can look at that by tag, by account, by service, by some subset to say it is this group. What this does is says, well, for the rest of it, the shared stuff, right? Like the IT broker group or the central cloud services team, we can take that overall cost for that group, basically the everything else bucket, and then divvy it up amongst the other groups, predominantly for chargeback, showback. And we can do it evenly, right? So we're just going to take it. We're going to say, hey, it's $1,000 divided across 5 different groups. Everybody gets $200. There you go. We can do it by ratio, which means that it is going to be proportioned based on the spend of each of those groups, right? So if leftover group 1 is 80% of the cloud bill, they're going to get 80% of the billing for the shared services cost, right? And then custom just allows you to specify, kind of where you want to go with that. And you get to specify a percent based. So I could say, you know what, even though Jeff's team is 80% of the bill, I'm only going to charge him 40% of the shared cost because I know he's not really driving up the support aspect. That's that guy, Greg, who doesn't know what he's talking about. IT constantly spends time helping him. So we're going to actually charge him a little bit more from that standpoint.
Greg,
So
that was great. I always get nervous when we start doing math live, especially simple math. We have another quick question. You can focus a little bit more on the allocation as well. But this question I thought was good. Right before I interrupted you, can you define how sensitive the trend up and trend down is? It looked like positive was red and any negative was green. So is there a way to adjust that sensitivity?
So to adjust the sensitivity, no. And if I'm not mistaken, you were talking about if we go into the table and the trend row, and for any UI people. So you're accurate in red. So I just want to be clear on positive versus negative, right? Because we're talking about billing and we're talking about cost. Negative is actually green, as in it is attributed as a positive aspect because it's actually a decrease in cost, right? In red, though it is technically a positive number, right? Not to get all math, but because it's a positive integer, it's showing like this without the minus. It's still categorized as red because it's an increase in spend. So That's actually also true of $0. I'll just call that out. If we had one that was 0, it would technically still be green because it's positive that it wasn't an increase. But that's how we do it. Is if it's an increase, it goes red because it's a, hey, this is not the right way to go from a cost saving standpoint. Again, you got to keep through the lens of cost savings. It's not saying an increase in spend inherently is negative, because if you launch a new service, your cost is likely going to go up. That's not really a bad thing, but from a cost saving standpoint, that's just how we differentiated between the red and the green.
That's great. I think you answered the question. I think the core answer though was, that is not a option you can configure yourself, but you explained why it's red and why it's green.
Yeah, at this time it's not. Whether or not we do palette changes and thresholds, and it'll stay green until this, or it'll go blue until this dollar amount. That's up for our UI team.
Awesome.
So Ben, yeah, we hear you. If that's something that you'd like to see, there's no reason why. The non-engineer guy is saying there's no reason why we.
Yeah, we'll make promises for the development team.
This is legally binding, right? So yeah, we have that ability to look at that. So yeah,
we've got a couple minutes left. I was just, I don't know if there's any more you wanted to demo, Greg. I'm happy to hop into the Q&A. Hopefully we'll get a couple good questions.
Just one tiny last thing that I want to point out. So the other thing too that's unique to our platform, we talk a lot about, we can see the change. Sometimes it takes a lot of drill in to get the why. We have a construct called an event. An event is something that you can add, if I could spell, right? And we can say when this is. Now I need to go based on the dummy data, and we'll go back to February 1st and we'll save it, right? And now I have my big events here. It's something that doesn't necessarily have to be cost related. It's something that doesn't necessarily have to be cloud related. There's usually correlation between the two. But the idea is, if you have a new customer onload, or a new project that you deploy, or a new service, or an update to an existing service, you can plot it so that we can see, very, very loose based, the correlation between what that did to your cloud, right? So for the example, and it's a really bad one because we know that this is all support charges and RIs, but just pretend it's not. There's a big event, and then you'll notice a huge decrease in cloud bill, right? Or, we can say that there's a change, and then slowly but surely the cost started creeping up, right? It's not an exact science in any way, but it gives you an idea of, hey, after we did this thing, we noticed an up and to the right for our cost, or after we did this thing, we noticed a decrease to the right, which might be the intent. It might be a good thing. It also could be a, let's look at how we deployed that, or let's look at what just changed, because there might be something that we missed, looking at it holistically.
That's awesome. We're getting some nice feedback in the chat about that capability, and I do think that is a nice feature. There's another question. I don't even know if I'll get to go to my question and answer slide, but do you have examples of recommendations for Google Cloud? Which GCP services do we support?
Which GCP services do we support in terms of recommendations, or which GCP services do we support?
I think I would show, what we do from a visibility perspective, and then what we do for recommendations. I know that's an area where we're building out additional capabilities, but not one of our strongest points right now.
Yeah, and part of that, defend us, is that Google has been changing their API. They just redid last year. They completely restructured how their API systems work. They originally came out, everything was an aggregate because they didn't really care. You just use a whole bunch of service and we just charge you a big block. They realized through AWS and Azure that people actually want to see per resource type billing. So they've changed, and they've been continuing to evolve per resource level type stuff. So it is an evolution, and we'll be getting more capabilities based on what Google continues to put out. but we do have very, very similar stuff. So I'm actually looking at GCP. I changed to the GCP demo environment like a ninja, and you can see, the dashboard looks the same, right? I mean, obviously some of the spend is different and some of the services are different, but that's just terminology, right? We do have the cost allocation area, so we can still do categories, we can still do business mapping, you can still see your overall cost spend. We still have drilling capabilities. Recommendations, to Jeff's point, is it's not 40 things, but we look at, if you want to use a CUD, right, or a committed use discount, we give recommendations around that. We give you IP idle, we give you virtual machine idle and stopped, as well as unattached disk. So we have some, and probably more than most of the people in the space. At least I know Jeff and I know that to be true of two different places. But yeah, we do have stuff in here, and it works very, very similar. If I actually left click as opposed to right click, you can see where it sits. It's a very, very similar view. This IP is attached not to, to no instances. So you're actually paying for it. Now, it's dummy data. I understand you're not paying $73,000 a year for an IP address. That would be, a very, very expensive IP address. But the idea is you have it in US Central. Here's the IP address. Here's the resource ID. It's out of this project, right? It says linked account ID, but it's out of this particular project. So you can see all of that information. And it's very, very, very similar to what we have in the other clouds. So I hope that answers the question there. Anonymous attendee that put that in.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks so much, Greg. I'm going to take over control because we're kind of approaching the end of time, and I don't want to keep people long. Just share my screen again. I just wanted to briefly talk. So I wanted to mention that we're offering a free cloud waste assessment service that you can register for at this URL, go.anodot.com/cloud waste assessment. This is similar to our free trial. So we'll start with a discovery call to help isolate areas in your infrastructure that you're specifically concerned about, but we'll help you connect to an Anodot instance, and we'll work with you to help identify some waste in your infrastructure and give you a sense of what's out there. This is usually a precursor to a fuller engagement with Anodot, but it's a lower pressure thing. Connecting is simple and quick. And if you want to get a sense for what your waste looks like, this is a great way to get started. So I'm just going to conclude. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Thanks, Greg, for giving the demo. Our contact information is here if you want to follow up with us directly. I'm sure we're going to send the recording out, so you'll get a follow up there and be able to respond if you have additional questions. Thank you, everyone, for your time. It was a great session. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.